Hello, Jose. Professor, good morning. Good morning, Professor.
Sorry. Good morning. How are you?
Yes, good. I'm good. Yes.
Everything is okay.
Yes, everything is okay.
Right. Right.
Jafaru. Hello, Jafaru.
Mr. Gay, good morning.
Good morning.
Jose, good morning.
Haru.
How are you doing? What time is it in your side? On your side?
It's almost 6 a.m.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Almost 6 a.m. So if you want, I can let them in, or you can I let the participant come in?
Yes, you can do it now. Yes, they can join us.
Good morning, Gonzalo.
Good morning, Jose.
Good morning.
Hola.
Hola, morning.
Hola, Gonzalo.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Morning.
Our friend from Jean Piaget, I think they join us. They will join us today.
Okay.
Gonzalo, what I'm doing is I'm starting with a short presentation saying that you are the director of research and the ITC, and say something too brief about this.
You want to make a short presentation?
I present you the first. You are the first speaker, Gonzalo. And the second one is Daniel. I don't see him.
Okay.
And the last one would be Santiago.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Last one.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. Okay, with short presentation, you have to bear in mind that in total you have 1 hour, including the answering the questions. So you have to take care of your time because you are three, so about 15 minutes, at most 20 minutes, okay? Because then after you, there is another speaker.
We have few people. We will wait. I think.
We are 16.
Yes. We have 5 minutes before start, so they will join us. All the participants, I think you have the protocol.
And Daniel Enriquez is there. Is he there? Because I only see Gonzalo and Santiago. Are you there, Daniel?
No, the second one is Raiko, okay? He's going.
Okay, no problem. It's just to check. Good morning, Emilio.
Hola, Emilio. Un abrazo desde Canarias.
Sí, Gonzalo, me alegro verte. Good morning for every people.
Good morning.
Morning, sir. Good morning.
Oh. Please, for all the participants, type your full name, institution, and country. Yes, I think we started the first day so that we can address all the participants every day. Please do it. For all the participants, please mute your microphone all the time, please. For your question, please use the chat area. You are not allowed to take the floor. Please use the chat area and write your question. We have Professor Jose Mila, who is the who is monitoring this training. He will just show your question to the trainer, who will answer. Please. I think we can start. They will join us. Yes.
I will start in a couple of minutes because it's Madrid time is 11:58.
Ah, okay.
We
58.
start right
Okay, so we have 2 minutes. Yeah.
just at 12 o'clock, okay?
Okay. Let them join us.
Yeah, would you mind introducing the protocol? Well, you said that, yeah.
Okay, let me remind the protocol again before we start. I just will remind the protocol. I did it, but I will remind again. For all the identification purpose, please, during this meeting, ensure to write or rename your full name. Follow your institution name. Please, you will go just. As I said, for all the participants, please mute your microphone during the meeting, during this training. For all questions, you have to use the chat area to write your question. I see that you are not allowed to take the floor. So you have just to mute your microphone during all this training session, please.
Okay.
Yes.
We can start.
Yes, we can start now.
Yes. Good morning to everybody. Today, there are intervention of the 3 trainers who belong to the ITC. ITC is the Institute of Technology of Canary Islands. I have the pleasure to say that over 70% of ITC staff are highly qualified technical and scientific workers. ITC has a tremendous ability and experience in the coordination of research international collaboration projects, in particular in West African countries. The first speaker is Gonzalo Piernaveja. Gonzalo is the Director of Research and Development of the Institute of Technology of Canary Islands. He has a degree in physics and his master in energy management by the University of Berlin. He's going to talk about Canary Islands as platform for the clean energetic technology transfer to Africa. So I pass the floor to Gonzalo.
Thank you very much for Jose Maria for this introduction, and welcome and good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen now. I hope you see it.
Right.
You see my screen?
Not
Jose Maria,
now,
it's okay?
Not now, but before it's black. Yes, I can say.
Okay, so my speech will be an introductory one, just to set the scene. First of all, about ITC, we are a big technology center here in the Canary Islands. We have approximately 200 people, and most of our research and technology activities are related to sustainable development. And we have approximately 50 people working with renewable energies and water technologies. So so we have a renewable energies department. My colleagues Raiko and Santiago will speak later on, and they belong to this department. And this department is here because in the Canary Islands we are facing, or we have been facing, similar problems as the problems you are facing in West Africa. So we are isolated regions, we are remote regions, we lack of conventional energy resources, and we want to we want to make an energy transition towards 100% renewable energy. So our work is dealing precisely with this objective, try to find ways, strategies to reach this goal. And this is quite hard, quite difficult for these isolated regions, because as in your case in Africa, our electrical grids are weak, are small, and if you want to increase the renewable energy penetration, it's not an easy job. So since you will have a presentation, I don't want to go deep into our lines of work, but there you see lines of work dealing with this energy transition. So both on the electricity as well as in the thermal part, but mostly on electricity. So we are characterizing renewable energy resources. We develop and design innovative energy generation systems. We also provide services. We have labs. There you see on the screen some pictures of some of our labs for distributed generation, for electronics in the energy sector, and so on. So we have also the energy planning. So we are the official consultant to our government in the Canary Islands for energy planning, and we are also advising the government, the Canary Islands government, in this energy transition. There you see we are also having some nice experimental facilities. There you see our facilities on Gran Canaria Island with several, we have 2 microgrids. So this is a technology which we think it's very suitable for remote areas of African countries. So we have facilities of that kind in our premises. No? We have also the technological infrastructure with workshops, and we also have renewable hydrogen. I think in this training seminar there will be also time for hydrogen. It's now the trend in Europe, and we were pioneers in developing green hydrogen solutions in the Canary Islands years ago. And we have also some technological equipment and software for simulation and for doing grid stability studies and so on. So I will pass these 2 slides, and I will now try to describe how the Canary Islands have been a laboratory or a platform of innovative energy technologies in the past and in the present. So, and I will begin with our expertise in this renewable energy and water technologies. Combining energy and water is especially characteristic of the Canary Island, because we lack of water, and we have been forced to produce water artificially by means of desalination. In this sense, we have been developing for more than 20 years systems that desalination plants that are powered directly with renewable energies. This is not an easy job, since usually desalination plants are designed to work 24/7 under nominal conditions. So we have to find strategies for optimizing this combination. And this is one, this is a picture where we began 22 years ago with big systems. Then we have also developed small systems. We have also developed some patents, like this DESOL, which is a more or less small desalination plant, which is powered by photovoltaic energy. And we have also transferred this technology to Africa. So we have installed several systems of this DESOL in Morocco and Mauritania. And now we are developing other systems for Cape Verde and in Morocco and Tunisia, and then we are developing for Cape Verde and Mauritania. Okay. So we have even this system, I think Raiko will speak about that later on, in Tunisia, which has been working for almost 15 years. So there you see some pictures. The system is can be also containerized and being portable. And we have transferred this patent to a local company called AMENET. And this is a picture of how the system looks like in the containerized version. So then we have also not only R&D facilities, but also real facilities where we have been consultant to private companies, like this wind farm, which has also connected to a desalination plants in an agricultural plantation for irrigation. Okay. So we have been also in the Canary Islands working in, as I said before, trying to maximize the penetration of renewable energies in our systems. So, and we have been working not only on the technical side, but also on the governance and also on the operation of the systems. And there are some, these are some projects, some European funded projects where we have advanced on these issues. So the Canary Islands were front runners in energy storage solutions. Almost 10 years ago, the energy operators began to install here batteries, which are now being common in Europe. No? Batteries on the medium to large scale, connected or installed in distribution and transmission networks. Then a little bit later, we began together with the distributor to integrate batteries into microgrids. And now the promoters of renewable energies, I mean the commercial promoters, are beginning to promote projects, large projects with photovoltaic or wind energy with batteries. Okay, so we are seeing a very big development here in the Canary Islands. And as I said before, all this experience can be extrapolated to the African countries. So in the medium or high voltage levels, what we are trying is to find to install reversible pumped hydro. So connecting renewable energy installations with reversible pumped hydro plants. For instance, in El Hierro, the island of El Hierro is one of the smallest islands of the Canary Islands with less than 10,000 people. We installed in 2014 a big system of 11 megawatt wind and 2 reservoirs, which are located at the one at the sea level and the other one at 700 meters. And we have achieved a very nice solution, because this system, there you see some pictures of the tubes, of the pipes, and of the reservoir, and of the turbines, and also of the pumps. We have managed to run the entire island on 100% by this wind hydro system for several days, so almost 1 month. And on the yearly average, we are reaching approximately 60% of the total demand of the island. So this is a nice example that can be replicated in other areas. The energy system operator in the Canary Island is also beginning to construct bigger reversible pumped hydro systems. On Gran Canaria, there is beginning the construction of a 200 megawatt reversible pumped hydro system that will store the excess wind energy that our grids are not able to absorb. Okay, so this is one solution that can be also replicated in your countries. On the lower scale, on the medium and low voltage scale, what we are doing is developing distributed generation solutions, incorporating microgrids with high renewable energy penetration. And my colleague Raiko will speak a little bit later about that. There, what we have done in 2 islands, La Graciosa and now La Gomera, we have been applying this approach. La Graciosa is a very, very small island, and we have developed a concept there of a connected microgrid. And in La Gomera, what we are developing is a multi-microgrid approach. There are 60 populational nuclei, more or less dispersed, and what we are doing is developing microgrid solutions in this particular nuclei, and incorporating also intelligent or smart solutions with battery storage and also connection to electric vehicles. Electric vehicles is booming in Europe, in Spain, and the Canary Islands, and this is as you know, a very nice way to do demand management, which is also another key aspect for this energy transition. Then we have gone also to the sea. We have in the Canary Islands the problem that our land is scarce, and if we want to do the transition to 100% renewable energy based system, we need space for installing lots of generation plants. And our vision is that the sea will host a big part of all this generation. And in fact, we have been pioneers in testing devices. We are testing wave energy devices. There will be commercial in several years. It's still a pre-commercial technology. But what we are seeing is that offshore wind and floating offshore wind is a very interesting technology for our areas. We are hosting here some tests of these new offshore wind energy technologies. Then in international cooperation, we have been working for more than 20 years with countries in all over the world, and particularly with West African countries. We have been also collaborating with ECREEE. There you see a picture of a seminar held several years ago at our premises in Gran Canaria, with people coming from all your countries. We have even edited books together with ECREEE, and we have even this delegation that time had the opportunity to visit a Hierro system. So when we are hosting here seminars or training sessions, we try that the attendees have a look at all these installations that I've shown you before. And this is what I told you before. This is so we are specialized in finding solutions for supply of electricity and water to remote areas. And we have been doing that in Mauritania, in Morocco, in Tunisia, Cape Verde, and also now more recently with ECREEE. I was personally at the inauguration of ECREEE 10 years ago in Praia, so I'm very happy to be here. So these are pictures of installations we have executed in West Africa, in Mauritania, and Morocco, and Tunisia. So, and now for finishing, an example of a recently awarded project where we have developed a mobile unit, particularly for refugee camps or areas that are affected by natural disasters, but it can be used for other purposes. So we have been doing that in collaboration with the United Nations, and our solution is based on the fact that there are lots of people, lots of refugee camps all over the world and also in West Africa, and they lack of basic infrastructure. So what we have developed is a system of integrated solution that can be easily commissioned, so easily transported and easily commissioned. So they are standard 20 feet containers that are connected to each other. One is for power, for the energy, for providing energy based on photovoltaics, as you see there. And the other one is for water production. So there is a water production unit, and the other one is a cooling container. Okay, so everything managed through an intelligent energy management system. There you will see the pictures. The container is still at our premises. We wanted to install this year in an African location, but this pandemic has slowed a little bit all the process. There you see it's a 15 kilowatt power unit able to supply several hundreds of peoples or even a small hospital after an emergency. Okay, so there you see the water supply system. There is a possibility to desalinate or purify the water, or even catching the water from the atmospheric, from the atmosphere. I mean the vapor of the water. There are machines now on the market able to do in that. And finally, freeze a cooling container with the possibility of storing food or medicines in two parts. One is 5 degrees and the other one 20 degrees. So that was it for the introduction. I thank you very much for your attention, and I leave the floor to my colleagues. Thank you.
You are welcome, Gonzalo. So the next speaker is Raiko. Raiko is the Chief of Renewable Energies Department of the ITC, and he's going to talk about the ITC experiences on rural electrification in remote regions of Africa. So you have the floor, Raiko.
Hi everybody. I'm going to approve. Everybody is hearing me? Is everybody hearing me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
loud and clear.
Okay.
I think so.
Good morning, everybody. First of all,
We are not listening to you. Yeah, are you there? Because we cannot hear the speaker. Gafaru, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, because I cannot hear anything.
You say what?
The speaker, I think, he mute his microphone, I think.
Okay, so Raiko, you should
Let him
put
on
on your
microphone.
Hello, Jafaru.
Yes?
yes.
I think you can unmute him from your side since you're the host.
No, I can only request him to unmute. I can only mute him, but to unmute him is his decision.
Oh, okay.
Raiko, are you there? Are you listening to me, please?
Or maybe you send him a chat.
So I think he had an internet issue.
Have you clicked on the desactivar audio?
You have to accept to Raiko because it seems that there is a problem and he have to connect again. But maybe we can start with my presentation and after
Right.
that he could speak, no?
Right, go ahead.
Okay. So if you can give me the role of presenter, perfect, I have.
Yes, I present you Santiago Diaz, the Chief of Section of Renewable Energy Department of the ITC, and he's going to talk about the impact change of energy and adaptation of the power sector to the climate change. And then after you speaks Raiko. Okay, go ahead, Santiago.
So I don't know if you could see my screen
Yes.
now.
Yes,
Perfect.
we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. So, well, in my case, I'm going to speak about climate change. First of all, thank you very much for the ECREEE, for the invitation, the kind invitation. I think that is a good opportunity to share the work that we have done in the framework of this subject. No? I think that is interesting at the end, the climate change, because everybody is speaking about that. And in my opinion, it's good because that means that the people think more in the future. No? It's an opportunity to integrate more renewables energies in electrical systems, not only African countries, but also insular electrical systems and that. No? So at the end, we are going to speak about three main projects in which we are participating in this subject, Circle Impact Project, ACLIMAC, and ENERMAC, okay? Circle Impact project is a project more related to insular electrical systems, but to tell the truth, it's interesting because we are close to the end. To tell the truth, we have defined very well the methodology, and we are going to apply the same methodology for other regions, between them Senegal, also Mauritania, Cape Verde, in the framework of another project that we are doing that is a CLIMAC, okay? So first of all, let's see the main idea of this project, no? In Circle Impact project, the thing that we try to do is first of all understand what are going to happen due to the climate change in specific regions, in insular electrical system of the European countries, no? And after that, define the main mitigation actions that could be implemented using as a reference the blue economy, okay? So that we have to find new markets as a way to solve problems that we have nowadays and problems that we will have in the future with the scenarios that we are defining, no? In our case, we are more related to the energy, no? And of course, the marine energy is, as Gonzalo said before, key in our case, but also in other regions, no? It could be also interesting for other places, like, sorry, you could see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So in general, we can define the methodology to estimate the consequences of the climate change, as I mentioned before, and after that, try to use the renewables energies and the circular economy as a way to solve these problems, no? So in this context, we have applied a methodology that is called the IPCC. Well, the IPCC is the United Nations intergovernmental organization, no? That define a specific methodology in the fifth evaluation report that was published in 2014, okay? And in this methodology, they define main, well, in general, 4 scenarios, okay? In each scenario, we have a different level of concentration of greenhouse emissions. They usually measure that using as a reference the degree of radioactive forcing. Is something easy to understand, okay? Is the difference between the radiation that we have, that radiation that we receive in the Earth, less the one that is sent again to the space, okay? And they define for each year different situations related to the degree of greenhouse emissions that we could have, no? So they define a extreme scenario with the 8.5, okay? And others that are more less problematic, that is the 2.6 and the 4.5, okay? The 6 is more like the medium term, okay? It's problematic, but in some cases, it's not too bad, okay? From at least in the experience of the systems in which we have analyzed them. No? In general, after the definition of these scenarios by the IPCC, the main people that develop this kind of forecastings prepare a set of models that have been published in this website, the NCAR, okay, in which you could find the 6th version of the community Earth system model, okay, is a model that has been computed for the complete Earth, okay, but with a resolution that is bad if you want to analyze for this kind of things, no? You could see here an example, no? In the case of Canary Island, maybe we have 1 point only per island, okay? So the resolution isn't enough for the applications that we need, no? In this context, we have implemented the model weather research forecast, in which we have a better resolution, and in which we could improve also the time resolution, no? At the end, with the last execution of this model, we obtain a resolution of 1.2, okay, with a temporal resolution of 10 minutes, okay? That is a lot. To tell the truth, maybe with 1 hour is more than enough. Okay. So using this methodology, okay, we have estimated the main problems that we could have in the future. No, one of these problems is the temperature. We have estimated that the temperature are going to increase between 1.4 and 2.6, depending on the scenario that we select. No, you could see that the value is different to the one that have been defined for the other regions in the world. Okay, and that is something important, because at the end, this kind of analysis could give you a specific value for the place in which you are, no? And that is really useful, no? If you want to do some energy planning for the future, no? As Gonzalo said before, we are participating here in the Canary Islands with the energy planning, and these kind of scenarios should be added to the models, no? But maybe the biggest problem that we have is the precipitation. We will have less precipitations than the one that we have now. So at the end, if we look in the energy sector, if we have less water, if we have more temperatures, that means that we are going to have problems because we need more energy to attend the same supply, the same demand that we have nowadays, no? At the end, we have defined the impact chains, is the one that you could see in this slide, no? We have several hazards. In this hazard, or for these hazards, we have a risk, and after that, we have to implement several solutions that will have an impact from the social and environmental point of view, no? So for example, if we have problems with the temperatures, because we have more temperature, we will increase the low demand. That require more investments in the installation of RES facilities, okay? But also we could see other problems, like for example, what happened with the dash? We will have more probability of suffer some damage in the transmission lines, and that is something that we have to analyze too, okay? So at the end, we have defined a set of models. Sorry. It seems that I have a problem with the presentation. Okay, I'm going to continue speaking, okay? We have defined a model, okay, in which, according with the results of the climate change scenarios that we have implemented, okay, and other variables, like for example, what happened with the resident population, what happened with other subjects like the intensity of the energy. We define the load demand that we will have in the future due to the desalination, the cooling, etc. Okay. Can you confirm that you are hear me well? Because sorry.
Sí, se te está oyendo bien, Santi.
Okay. Because I have a problem with the presentation. I have a problem with the presentation. I cannot continue with that, but I'm going to continue speaking. Okay. So we identify several problems, no? And as I mentioned before, these problems is more for the consumption, but not for the production of energy. The thing that we have seen is that maybe the variations due to the wind resource and the photovoltaic production is less than 2%. So in this case, in our case, it's not a big problem. The problem is what happened with the low demand, okay? In this context, the main idea, sorry for the presentation, but I don't know why.
Wow, Santiago.
Yeah. I don't know, the computer is dead.
Close the slides and restart again.
Yeah, I have a lag, I don't know. Okay, and the main mitigations plan that we can implement in this case, it seems that now, try to respond. Okay. Now, okay, I'm going to continue. Regarding the main mitigations plan that we can implement, okay, now, the main mitigations plan that we can implement for solve this kind of problem that we have recognized, of course, we have to introduce more renewable energies. In general, the problem that we have is that at the end we try to introduce more renewable energies in systems that have problems from the stability point of view, no? So for that, we usually said that we have to identify several solutions that are the strategies that you could see here: the grid stability, the forecasting, the demand side management, the energy storage, and the distributed generation. From our point of view, always we have to start with the grid stability, because at the end you can recognize problems at the beginning, okay, of the implementation of a wind farm, for example, and maybe with only some changes in the configuration of the type of the transformer, or with integration of a reactor, you could solve problems and implement more energy than the one that you could introduce without this kind of analysis. No? The second element from our point of view is the forecasting, because at the end, the forecasting is the cheapest option. If you could implement a good system to forecast the production that you are going to have in the short term and even in the 1 day ahead, you will require less requirements in terms of energy storage. So it's something that is important to implement. It's always an investment that have really good results. No? After that, the demand side management. As Gonzalo said before, here, for example, the vehicles, the electric vehicles could be a really good demand that could be managed, okay? But we have others, for example, the pumping. What happened with the pumping system, no? If you can control the pumping to produce more water, for example, in moments in which you have more production, more renewable energies production, it could be better, because at the end you have to apply less curtailments for these facilities, in these facilities. No? The energy storage is a key element, and the distributed generation. The distributed generation is like a combination of the rest of the elements that we have mentioned before. No? Right, we are going to give you some example of the work that we have done in this framework. No? That is more or less social impact project, but the idea is try to implement that for other regions. No? We started at the end of the last year in another project that is called ECREEE, in which we participate with Cape Verde, with the University of Cape Verde, the University of Nanchok in Mauritania, and also with the AMENET in Senegal, okay? And in this project, we try, first of all, to do more or less the same methodology to estimate the consequences of the climate change for 2050 and 2100 in these regions, no? And also implement different mitigation plans, as you could see in this slide, no? The first activity is more related to the definition of the consequences of the climate change, and the other activities are more related to these mitigations plans that could be implemented and are going to be implemented in some cases in all these regions. No? We have activity related to distributed generation, another more related to the adaptation of electrical infrastructure. The new economics, we in the last presentation spoke about the blue economy, but also we have to integrate the circular economy and also the low carbon economy and other actions more related to the efficiency of the electrical systems for large consumers, buildings, and also for local level for the communities. No? So according with that, we have defined several activities. We have started with these activities, some of them. Some of them are really interesting, like the alternatives that we could develop for the implementation of biogas plants. In this context, for example, in Senegal, we are going to install a biogas plant in the framework of this project, okay? But it's not the only one activity that we are going to do there. We are going to analyze, for example, a system for cogeneration in a rice husking plant, okay? And also the integration of some facilities to produce AC in schools, no?
Tiago,
yeah.
Sorry, we are running out of time, so take all the time.
Okay, so that is the second project that I mentioned. The order is NMAC. We have working on that for 3 years. The only thing that I have to mention is that we have implemented different solutions, not only for universities, but also the integration of a biogas plant in Mauritania. Sorry for the presentation, the computer fails. Anyway, we will have the presentation for you, and we are open to answer all the questions that you could have, okay?
Okay, so Raiko, go on without.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so sorry. Before gone out of the presentation, and I don't know what happened, but it's the typical life problem that if something is okay, it's because we are doing something wrong in this kind of things. So I'm going to start with my presentation. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to try to be brief because I only have 15 minutes. Usually this kind of
answer the questions as well. Okay,
okay.
Go ahead. Are you seeing my screen? Yes, we watch it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Wait.
That's in your screen.
Okay. The structure of my, I don't know if you are. Wait. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The structure of my presentation, I will divide my presentation in 3 blocks, but the first one I will talk about the ITC experience. Mainly, as Gonzalo said, we have worked in a lot of projects in Africa, but I'm only talk about 2 of them. Why these two projects? Because one of them represents absolutely a case of success. This case is the desalination standalone system in Casar, Gillen in Tunisia. And I'm going to talk about another one that is the specific project for rural electrification in Valle da Custa, a village of Valle da Custa in Cape Verde. Because this is an example of a failed project, but I think it's interesting to talk about this. The second part is I'm going to talk about the key points to get success in this kind of projects. And finally, I want to to talk about where we are and where we go. But why? Because we are now in a moment that we are, it is changing the electric paradigm, and the future that is not the future is
Raiko, no tienes la presentación. Raiko, no tienes la presentación. Tienes la pantalla, el fondo de pantalla. No estás con la presentación.
Okay, okay.
Do the same.
Wait.
Close and restart. Okay, now
Ahora sí.
Another one. Okay.
Okay, I'm so sorry. So the first project that I want to talk about is a success project. I am going to show you the Casar Gillen project within the framework of the Spanish-Tunisian cooperation, a project for supplying fresh water through a desalination plant driven by a standalone solar photovoltaic energy. The project is located in Casar, in the village of Casar Gillen, an isolated village of 300 inhabitants in the southern Tunisia. In the middle of the Sahara desert, 150 kilometers away from the nearest electrical grid and 60 kilometers away from the nearest freshwater well. In this project, it was designed the desalination plant and solar photovoltaic generator to work as isolated from the grid, including the battery system to supply energy during the night and when renewable resources are not available. But not only the technical solution was developed in this project, ITC worked jointly with the local authorities to create a structure of local management which guarantees a proper running for as long as possible. And of course, to achieve the social acceptance, really important in these cases, of the inhabitants. But which were the key points to get success in the Casar Gillen project? I'm so sorry. Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
It's okay. But which ones are the key points to get success in this project? That I think it's really important to emphasize this question. First of all, that project. First of all, this project starts with a bottom-up identification problem, which arrives to the ITC from the local needs and not in the opposite sense. Another key point was the involvement of local population and the social awareness. In the next project, I will talk about that. Social awareness was not properly implemented, and was the key of the start of the problems of another project. But in this case, the social awareness was another key point to get success, and it is very important because it is very important to involve local stakeholders if you want that people take care of the facilities if they were the owners. It is really, really important part to get success. Another key point was, of course, accurate design and technology selection is another part really important. Taking into account, in this case of Casar Gillen, we had to take into account the extreme environment condition, mainly related to the ambient temperature. For example, I'm going to talk about one specific thing of this project. For example, in this project, was implemented with batteries to run as isolated. So lead acid batteries included in the project are particularly sensitive to the operation temperature, because together with the rates of charge and discharge and depth of discharge are the main degradation mechanisms. So you have to take care about the operation temperature if you want to guarantee the proper operation of the batteries. Because the lifetime is closely linked to these parameters. So a cooling system, a strong cooling system was implemented into the facilities, and after 10 years, batteries continue operating. When usually this kind of battery, usually after 4 or 5 years, start to work not in the good way, start to fail. But in this case, after 10 years, continue operating. Of course, a local government involvement was crucial, giving financial and technical support during the lifetime project. The second project is the opposite idea, is the rural electrification in Valle d'Acusta in Cape Verde. I'm going to use a quote of Leoncho Garcia that say, in chess, the loser is who learns more. So we have to take that kind of project and explain and analyze why they are failed. So in this case, the project consists on install a power system, a hybrid power system with photovoltaic technology, wind turbines, batteries, and diesel genset to supply the electricity for a village. The IDC only collaborate with this project, giving support. Perhaps we are watchers, not executors. But we know very good this project.
Raiko, please, we are running out of time, so you can summarize just a bit, because then you have to answer the questions.
Okay, I'm so sorry, but I'm so sorry. In this case, the problem, the main problems was that it didn't join the awareness campaign, so people of village. I'm sorry. First of all, that project was developed without a legal framework. So the owners of the facilities was the government. So they couldn't take the money of payments of the electricity, and the problem starts because people start to install the electricity. I'm so sorry, I'm going to try to be brief, but it's very difficult if I want to explain with projects. So I'm going to be more brief. The lesson learned in this project, that the importance of awareness campaign before the start the project, the need of a suitable legal framework to implement the project, the definition of the good stakeholder roles and responsibilities, because if you don't do that, then when start the problem, nobody knows who is the responsible to repair the fails, or to do another lesson learned was the you have to develop the business model before to guarantee the long-term feasibility of the project, training the local technician and develop the training of the local technician, the importance of local markets to supply spare parts. That is another key issue, because when something failed in that location, they couldn't, they hadn't spare parts to repair the problems. And another problem was that in this project, they couldn't select the more suitable technology to give a solution of the problem. Finally, okay. I only have 2 minutes. I'm going to talk about where we are and where we go, because where we are and where we go, the microgrids and rural electrification, the thing that is going to happen, that is the electrification cover is bigger and bigger. Perhaps in the future, all microgrids and rural electrification will be connected with the main grid. We have new technologies and we have enhanced the power electronics. We have smart technologies, and the energy model is changing. What we have to do with all of these things, we have to generate microgrids to operate together that operate together these different microgrids together with the main microgrid. So I don't have time. I'm so sorry. I have to finish, but I don't know how to continue because I only have 1 minute. So I'm so sorry for the presentation. Emilio, I don't know if I have 5 more minutes to continue, but because I have the clock here and it says that is the time.
Okay, thank you.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have, yes, we can just to answer one question. The first question, and then you can answer them by a written way to the emails, right, of participants. It's a question for Santiago, which is the most effective strategy in developing economies like ours, referring to West Africa, for penetration of renewable energies?
So in my opinion, there is not a clear answer to this question, because that depends on the place in which you are analyzing that, no? For example, in our case in Canary Island, we are trying to promote the self-consumption, no? It could be a good strategy, but it's not only one alternative, no? Maybe we have to look for energy storage or the alternative, but that depends on the place in which you are analyzing. And that is the reason why we develop this kind of projects, no? To analyzing each region.
Okay, finally, I have to say that the presentations, you can find them in the ECREEE webpage or in AMENET webpage, as I said yesterday. So thank you very much for the ITC speakers, and we go on with the next presentation. The speaker is Lázaro. Lázaro, thank you very much for being here. Lara holds a PhD in economics from the London School of Economics and Political Science, LSE. She's a senior analyst at the Royal Institute Elcano. This institute is a think tank specialized in international and strategic studies. In addition, I would like to say that I'm very proud of Lara for her outstanding professional career and for being one of my smartest former students. So thank you very much, Lara, for being here. And Lara is going to talk about climate change geopolitics. I give the floor, Lara.
Thank you very much. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to be here with all of you today. And thank you so much, Jose Maria, because you've always traveled with me in this very sort of winding road to where I am now. So thank you ever so much for your support throughout all of these years. Great. So if I may, I will share my screen, if that is okay. Do let me know if you can.
That's okay.
If you can see it properly, I'll just. It'll take a minute because my computer is a bit slow. So I was wondering whether you could see my full screen now. Can you see my screen? Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can see it, watch it, but if you cannot move the slide, restart again, please.
Right, okay. Sorry, my computer's just frozen on me. Let me try and, there you go.
Try again.
Sorry about
close
that.
it and...
Hopefully it'll be.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just try again.
That's it. It's okay, Lara.
Okay, great. So for today, the geopolitics of climate action, Africa in a distributed leadership space. We're going to do zoom out as regards what you have just been seeing about renewable energy projects, and hopefully this will give you a broad overview of the political economy of action as regards climate change as well. So we'll start with climate goals and action, the challenges, and we'll finish off with Africa in a distributed leadership context. As you know, the global framework for climate action, and this is important in terms of energy, which is the key focus of this training, because 3/4 of greenhouse gas emissions around the world that endanger a stable climate, which is a global public good, come from the energy sector. So what we do in the energy sector is going to have a big impact in terms of how we fare as regards our climate commitments. So the global framework of concerted climate action starts back in 1992 with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was entered into force a couple of years later. This United Nations Framework on Climate Change stated the key principles that govern concerted climate action since the 90s, including the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. So we will act in the global stage according to our own capabilities. This is a principle that has been contentious throughout negotiations and key in order to engage less developed countries and regions. In 1997, we adopted the Kyoto Protocol, which is the first climate agreement that has commitments for greenhouse gas emission reductions by developed countries. So our goal back in 1997 was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 5.2% from 1990 levels between 2008 to 2012, which was the first commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. And this took a bit longer to ratify due to various reasons that we can go on to discuss in the Q&A. but in the 16th of February 2005, the Kyoto Protocol entered into force. Obviously, it didn't cover the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions, and hence it was a step towards concerted climate action, but by no means sufficient in order to limit dangerous interference with the climate system, which is what the UNFCCC strive to do. In 2015, we adopted the Paris Agreement in the 12th of December. So this December will be the 5-year anniversary of the Paris Agreement. And it was very interesting for many reasons. It is, as we know, insufficient to limit greenhouse gas emissions to a level that is compatible with a bearable climate. But it has interesting features that reflect much better the different geopolitics at play in the post-Kyoto world. The Paris Agreement strives to limit global mean temperature increases to less than 2 degrees and strives to limit that global mean temperature increases to 1.5 degrees compared to pre-industrial period. It's in comparison with the Kyoto Protocol and the UNFCCC, it's a hybrid type of agreement. So instead of having a global goal set at the international level, we have elements called the nationally determined contributions. So these are the plans by the different nation states which are the subjects of international climate law and international law in general. So these national plans go to the UNFCCC. They are developed according to the country's interests and needs and capacities. And they are all put together and supervised, analyzed at the global level. So it comes from the bottom up in terms of nationally determined contributions, while the analysis and the supervision and the adding up is done more on an international level. Aside from the temperature goal, we see in COP21 that there was a push for pre-2020 action and support, that we also have transparency and global stocktake. So we were very aware in the international community that what we had in 2015 in terms of the first nationally determined contributions was not enough to reach our climate goals. And therefore, we have a ratchet up mechanism by which every 5 years, we come together and we see how we are doing and how we can increase our ambition. We also have a leg on finance, technology and capacity building that has been paramount to the development of climate action since the inception of the global climate regime. We committed, in part due to Africa's push, to fast-track finance from 2020 to 2012. And from 2020 onwards, there is a commitment by the international community to deliver $100 billion in climate finance so that countries that need can be assisted in order to mitigate climate change, to reduce their emissions, and to adapt to the impacts of climate change. We also have something that's critical, I believe, not only for developing countries, but also for developed countries, which is a push for adaptation and loss and damage. This is a blind spot for regions such as Europe. It is not discussed in policy circles, unfortunately. And as we traverse the path towards higher temperatures that we are in at the moment, I believe that this is an area that will be developed further. Those are some of the key issues within the Paris Agreement. In terms of climate impacts and climate responsibilities, what we have here are two graphs. The graphs on the left the graph on the left of your screen is the green, the gigatons of CO2 emissions equivalent. These are absolute emissions. So we have China overtaking the EU and the US by the middle of the first decade of this century. We have the US following behind, the European Union, India, Russia, Japan, and international transport there. So on the second graph, you have on the y-axis, you have the, let me just use the arrow here. On the y-axis, we have the tons per capita. This is emissions per capita. And on the x-axis, we have the years from 1990 to 2018. Here the picture changes, as you can see. Out of the large emitters, it is not China who is the largest emitter in terms of CO2 equivalent per capita. It is the US. There are other countries that are less prominent, that have less weight in global emissions, that have higher per capita emissions, obviously, but these are out of the large emitters: the US, Russia, Japan, China, that overtook the European Union, and the global level. What is interesting here is that globally we are over 3 times the greenhouse gas emissions that we should be at in order to be able to limit greenhouse gas emissions to a level that is compatible with climate goals. Let me just try and, excuse me 1 second. There we go again. Right.
Okay. Okay.
In terms of where we're at and where we need to be, this graph here shows very clearly that there is a gap between our commitments and where we should be at in order to limit greenhouse gas emissions to a level compatible with an increase in temperature of 2 degrees. To the right of the graph, you see different bars. If we are to strive for an increase in global mean temperatures of 1.5 degrees, we have a gap of 32 gigatons of CO2 equivalent if we look at the unconditional pledges by the countries. So that is more than half of our current emissions would have to be curbed in order to limit that temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. So the scale of the challenge is unprecedented. The key causes of these emissions, as we know, are population, growth per capita, energy intensity, so energy per unit of GDP, and emission intensity, emissions per unit of energy. This is a famous Kaya identity of the 90s that has been profusely used also in the IPCC reports. This does not capture everything that happens with greenhouse gas emissions. For example, it doesn't capture planning, it doesn't capture climate legislations or culture or international trade issues, for example. So what we see here is that in order to tackle climate change along with poverty has been described by Sir Nicholas Stern as the 2 key defining challenges of the 21st century, it is abundantly clear that we are not going to be able to go at this alone, that we need international cooperation, and we need international cooperation at a time of very complex geopolitics. We need to govern climate change, so that means that decisions have to be made not only at the national level, but also at the international level, at the regional and local levels, and not only by nation states, but also by the private sector and by civil society and individuals. So this points towards the need for governing climate change. And although in the literature, there's no agreed definition of governance, and Koeman, for example, says that we are still in a period of creative disorder concerning governance. And Jordan et al., for example, say that we are still in a period of flux. They developed their work based on Elinor Ostrom's framework for polycentric governance. We do believe that the approach to understanding and perhaps explaining climate action is through the lens of governance. It's a broad term covering all institutions and relationships in the process of governing. One of the key features is that even though from the Reagan era of the 80s, there has been a greater uptake of market-based instruments, including subsidies, including emission trading schemes, including taxation. Command and control still is the instrument of choice for climate action all over the world for various reasons, not for reasons of static and dynamic efficiency, but for reasons of easier implementation, more alignment with a sense of right and wrong, and perhaps on behalf of companies, it's easier to sort of have an influence in the outcome of standards and command and control regulations. And what we see in this governance of different issues, but also of climate change, is that social actors start to coordinate more amongst themselves with more limited government steering. If we go on to the geopolitics of climate action, we know that traditionally, and there are various papers and a broad literature on geopolitics and geopolitics of climate action, we see that geopolitics refers to the interaction and rivalries between states. There's a role of geographical settings in human affairs, in international politics in particular, and there are modes of knowledge and representation that shape the related political discourse and policy formulation. And while all of the issues with climate finance and how to get finance to the right places, especially in renewable technologies and renewable energy sources that have high upfront costs, there is by and large a broad literature regarding the fact that there's also a need to put in place climate policies and renewable energy policies that de-risk renewable energy investments, that help scale and make bankable these renewable energy investments. And there's a need for training in different, in the banks, for example, and in investors. So there's a whole host of issues that are beyond the pure economics, that are related to the political economy of climate action. So as regards past discussions, we see that climate had a bearing on societies and their qualities. From the 21st century onwards, we enter the era of the human influence in climate, the Anthropocene, as it has been called. So we see humans influencing climate. We can demonstrate we can test and hypothesize about the extent to which humans have influenced climate. And there's a reverse in the causal logic of the human-nature relations. That's only very recent. As regards the geopolitics of climate change, we see industrial powers and the global economy being fueled by fossil fuels, leading to anthropogenic climate change. And the geopolitics of climate change is now about the struggle to control this process and evade or accept responsibilities and shape international institutions to deal with the consequences of climate change. So what would be sort of the schematic analysis of what the geopolitics of climate change is looking like right now? Well, I'm sure we could include many other regions and particular countries in this analysis, but we have summarized it as the 5 W's for WOOS and the need to distribute climate leadership. And this idea of distributed climate leadership draws on the analysis of Laurence Tubiana, who, as some of you might know, was one of the key architects of the Paris Agreement. So, which will then lead us to the analysis of who has to contribute to this distributed climate leadership space. What we see in the geopolitics of climate at the moment, and this is prior to COVID-19, is the United States, which contributes to around 14 to 15% of greenhouse gas emissions globally, and historically much more than that. As you probably know, with the Trump administration, it has pledged to withdraw from the Paris Agreement according to Article 28 of this agreement. And this withdrawal, the first W, means slashing international climate funding. So out of the $3 billion that was committed by President Obama, I see someone writing on the presentation. If you could please not, that'd be great, thank you. So this is going to mean a big dent in both the science, the US-led science of climate change and climate action that has been paramount in order to inform global climate policy making for the past decades. We see Brazil, for example, that is responsible for 2% of greenhouse gas emissions globally, withholding from international negotiations, especially in Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which is devoted to market and non-market based instruments. With China, we see a sort of mixed picture, because China is, as you know, the largest greenhouse gas emitter globally. But it's also, as you might have heard during these past few days in the training, it is the largest investor in renewables of the last decade, with UNEP, FI, and the Frankfurt School estimating the investment in renewable energy sources by China in 758 billion in the past decade. So it's by and large the biggest investor in renewable energy sources. So that's one side of China. So largest emitter, biggest investor in renewable energy sources. And then we have two very different discourses. We see Xi Jinping pushing for that differentiation between developed and less developed countries, which has always been the case in China's positioning historically. In the aftermath of the US saying that they would withdraw from the Paris Agreement, China and Xi Jinping at the World Economic Forum in January 2017 came out as a torchbearer of multilateralism and supporter of the Paris Agreement. We see that. We also see the latest United Nations General Assembly announcement by China, stating that it would reach the peak in its greenhouse gas emissions earlier than it had stated, before 2030, and that it would strive for carbon neutrality by 2060. This is the first time that China has agreed to a net zero target, even if it's not climate neutrality, which is the target by the EU. It's carbon neutrality, which is different. But on the other side, we have the Belt and Road Initiative, China's grand going out strategy, in which there are trillions of investments. If we analyze those investments in China, and some of them have come to Africa, as you probably know, these have been by and large focused on fossil fuel investments. So if you analyze China's global Belt and Road Initiative investments from 2014 to 2018, around 80% of those investments in the energy sector have gone to fossil fuels. And although there is a pledge to green the Belt and Road Initiative, and there's an international coalition within within UNEP, and there are calls from Xi Jinping to green the BRI, this is still at the rhetoric level. We have seen guidelines and plans and strategies to green the BRI, but we don't see this in the actual investments yet by China. So we have that two-level game, if you want, by China. We also have India with significant commitments to invest in renewable energy sources, but as other less developed countries, very focused on their well-being, our fourth W, and on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. And for the fifth W, we see the EU. And here is the 5W, which is willing and able with a question mark. We know that the European Union has been a leader by example, so a directional leader in more academic terms. The European Union GDP has grown by almost over 60% now from 1990, while its greenhouse gas emissions have dropped by more than 20%. So we have been able to decouple our growth and our emissions. There's a discussion whether the extent to which that decoupling has happened, because we have exported our emissions to other countries that have become the engine of the world, basically displacing that responsibility eastwards in the globe. But there are many questions regarding the EU, Brexit, the yellow vest movement. So all of the issues of how this low carbon transition is going to affect communities, it's going to affect people, it's going to affect jobs. And I think the EU has taken a good note of that and developed initiatives such as the coal regions in transition, and a whole host of actions and initiatives in order to arrest this unequal transition. The extent to which we will be able to further decouple our economy from our greenhouse gas emissions is yet to be seen. We do have political commitments. We have the European Green Deal that strives to achieve climate neutrality, not carbon, such as the case in China, but carbon neutrality for China, climate neutrality for the European Union. We have seen in the aftermath of the COVID-19 that the European Union has reinforced its policy call for climate neutrality and for a green recovery. We have enacted the next generation, or we have developed and proposed the next generation EU, which is a short-term recovery instrument that is accounts, well, it will include 750 billion euros in recovery, in short-term recovery. A bit more than half of that will be grants and transfers, and the rest will be loans that will be repaid from 2027 to 2058. So that is it's the first time this has happened by the European Union. I think the European Union had to respond in a very sort of forward-looking way, because after Brexit, any response to a health and social crisis of this dimensions would have probably had very dire consequences for Europe. And even though the commitments are there, there's still a question of the extent to which we will be able to deliver on those commitments. Here we have different types of leadership in terms of international climate action that we can go into a little bit later, if you will. And if we go now, if we zoom into Africa within this distributed leadership context, and before going into Africa, we think about what's happened before in this climate leadership binomial ahead of the Paris Agreement between the US, the Obama administration, and Xi Jinping. Now with the US retrenching and pulling out of the Paris Agreement on the 4th of November 2020, a different story might obviously emerge if Joe Biden is elected as the 46th president of the United States, but that's a whole other story. But without the US, there's a void in terms of international climate leadership to be filled. Now, the question is, will the EU and China, as some of the analysts and scholars pledged, be able to fulfill this leadership gap that was occupied by the United States? And if we go back to this idea of distributed climate leadership and how the Paris Agreement was forged in a much more distributed way, including many more actors, providing the world with this global climate action agenda and with a NASCA platform, so that private parties could present their commitments. So we see that in this global climate governance context, there are questions regarding who is going to be at the steering wheel from COP26, which will happen in Glasgow next year, onwards. And the question here is, yes, there seems to be historically connections and actions and agreements between the EU and China. From 2017 onwards, the EU, China, and Canada have held different summits in order to foster climate action. But there are others that need to be sat at the table, and there's a space for other regions and other forward-looking actors within those regions to take a step forward. We know that the latest report by UN and other scientific institutions, United in Science, is calling us to renew and accelerate our efforts, and that calls for more actors. So our analysis includes not only the EU and China, but also Latin America with 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, with also a very forward-looking agenda, especially for certain certain groups, such as ILAC, and a prominent role in increasing ambition, heading towards the Paris Agreement. But there's less analyses of the role of Africa. Now, Africa is the continent with the smallest contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. The figures change depending on what is included and what is excluded, and the data, etc. A range between 3.8 and 7 can be seen in the literature. It's a continent with over 1.3 billion in around a bit less than 20% of the global population, 70% of lack of access to energy, and less than, oops, that should be a less, not a greater than, but a smaller than 10% of the global GDP. I'll correct that when I upload it to the website. It's a continent in which we have, as you can see in the map, various bioregions. It's very vulnerable to climate change, but this vulnerability is asymmetric depending on where we are. We see overall high exposure to climate change, low adaptability in general terms, pre-existing socioeconomic conditions that hinder climate action. Obviously, poverty is one of the key concerns. The impacts of climate change in the past 50 to 100 years have been significant. So 0.5 degree centigrade increase. The future is also bleak, and this there's also work by the Max Planck Institute as regards the MENA region that is quite stark. If you're interested in North of Africa and the Middle East, one of the most striking findings for me, at least, is that in high emission scenarios, so in RCP 8.5, so if we don't do anything about climate change, the region of North Africa and the Middle East can see heat waves that can span most of the year. So imagine having to work in temperatures like 46 degrees. This is obviously causing labor problems, employment problems, health problems, and a whole host of other problems. So depending on the climate mitigation scenario, the impact for Africa can vary widely. As regards precipitation, as you probably know, there's less data and greater uncertainty, but still the idea is that pre-existing trends in precipitation are going to be exacerbated. We also can expect changes in species ranges, less water availability, food security concerns, and an unsolved and open debate on socially contingent outcomes. So we know that one of the impacts of climate change, not direct and not unique, but socially mediated and economically mediated outcomes, can be an exacerbation or ignition of migration, especially internal migration and conflict. We still don't have enough data and robust enough modeling to tell us what the relationship between climate change and migration and climate change and conflict is, which is a research gap, if you will. But we do know that there are certain indications that climate change can exacerbate migration and conflict in Africa and elsewhere. As regards what countries are doing, we know that climate legislation has spiraled, if you will. It's experienced an exponential growth of 20-fold since the 90s globally. That Africa has 409 laws and policies, so that is under a third of current global climate change legislation. So there is climate legislation that is increasing, especially executive, so not necessarily laws, but also plans, strategies, etc. There's also a trend towards increased litigation. So we are taking, especially in those countries that are a bit more difficult in terms of federal level action. There's a tradition in the US, in this particular case, to resort to the courts in order to require action by states or action by companies. There's also an interesting development in terms of how attribution science is developing. The science of attribution is basically trying to establish the increase in probability and increase in severity of extreme weather events. And with these developments in the attribution of extreme weather events, the changes in science lead to changes in the duty to protect. So we can see, or we might foresee, a greater litigation as this climate science develops. As regards African NDCs, so the country's commitments as regards climate, so the nationally determined contributions, so these are nation states' commitments towards climate, we see, as the case in other regions in the world, heterogeneous NDCs in content, structure, and format. We have to remember that prior to the Paris Agreement, the countries had to submit their NDCs. Many of them did submit these NDCs on time, but they reflect different interests, lack of overall guidelines, methodologies, and templates. And we see also that perhaps some of the NDCs are also reflecting a negotiating strategy. So if I bring a really, really ambitious commitment to Paris, then I have little wiggle room to backtrack from my commitments, and no one wants to be sort of pointed at in the international scene. So NDCs at the moment, they're not comparable. We see in Africa that adaptation is key. We see a very clear reflection of the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. We see a very important role of conditionality. So the commitments in terms of greenhouse gas emission reductions are conditional on receiving finance and technology. As regards how ambitious African commitments are, there's a reference publication it's called the Climate Action Tracker, the CAT analyses, and that the methodology is available if you want to have a look. We see that Morocco, Ethiopia, and Kenya would be in the range of commitments that are compatible with our Paris goals, versus South Africa, which is rated as highly insufficient, and with a markedly brown COVID-19 recovery plan. So this is the stage of play at the moment. It's true that the CAT analysis does not cover many countries in Africa, but there are some climate champions in Africa with significant renewable energy commitments overall. We see, according to Munoz and Socona 2016 analyses, that the renewable energy sources addition in NDCs in Africa amount to 102 gigawatts in solar power, basically the largest part in solar power, but also hydro, wind, geothermal, concentrated solar power, and biomass. You have the data there. So that would be the equivalent to Spain, to the installed capacity in Spain at the moment. The investment that is estimated to be required to implement this renewable energy sources addition is a bit more than Spain's national energy and climate change plan. So that is sort of the size of the commitment and the investment requirements compared to one of the large European countries. What we see also in the renewable energy sources commitments in NDCs in Africa is that mitigation is as expected, so no surprises there. So we use renewable energy sources commitments to address our mitigation goals. But there are also interesting developments because, for example, Nigeria, Tanzania, Mali, and Uganda also use their climate commitments as a way to adapt to climate change. So as a way to respond to greater demand for electricity and for reductions in thermal efficiency, especially in hydro. I know I'm running a bit pressed for time here, and I do want to give you guys the opportunity to pose some questions. But very quickly, this slide shows the detail in the mitigation policy, the unconditional contribution to mitigation and the conditional. So this is a qualitative analysis of how ambitious NDCs in Africa are, the financial support required in order to implement the conditional and unconditional NDCs, and the willingness to engage in market mechanisms, that Article 6 of the Paris Agreement that is still to be fully negotiated. And as you can see, the last column is response to whether the adaptation component is addressed in Africa's NDCs. As you can see, all of the African countries analyzed here have an adaptation component. In terms of non-state climate action implemented or planned by the region, it's also very interesting to see that the Sub-Saharan Africa has one of the largest, it's the second column from the right. In the x-axis, you have different regions. In the y-axis, you have the number of non-state actions implemented or planned by region. You have Europe as the region that has the most, sorry about the fly, the region that has the most non-state action implemented or planned, but Sub-Saharan Africa is the second region. In terms of whether people are concerned about climate change, again, the Pew Research Centre here doesn't cover many of the countries, most of the countries in Africa, and both Northern and Sub-Saharan Africa. But we do see, for example, that in Kenya, most of the people see climate change, which is the green color there, as a major threat to the country, above other issues, above cyber attacks, about Russia's power and influence, about the Islamic militant group known as ISIS. So it is also an issue of concern. And just to wrap up very quickly, we go on to the role that Africa has played and could potentially play, and perhaps how we could strengthen our networks and commitments in looking forward to concerted global climate action. So what we see is that Africa, and this is a picture of groupings of countries in international climate negotiations that you have on the left-hand side of the screen. We see that Africa has engaged in different negotiating blocks since the 90s, G77 plus China, BASIC with South Africa, the Africa Group of Negotiators. Within the G77, the literature concludes that Africa was by and large a follower, especially up to 2006 with COP12 in Kenya. In the earlier stages of international climate negotiations, there's a lack of interest by different governments, lack of personnel, lack of trained negotiators, so perhaps sending scientists rather than trained negotiators to international climate negotiations. From 2006 onwards, we see a turning point in Africa's stance in international climate negotiations. We see an increase in their number of submissions in these negotiations. We see, as we mentioned earlier, a key role in fast start finance. So that 30 billion that was committed from 2010 to 2012, and long-term finance. This is the pledge that especially developed countries, but also those countries that are not developed but are able to provide climate finance from 2020 onwards, the 100 billion that I mentioned earlier. And Africa also, different countries in Africa also push for the Kyoto Protocol second commitment period that unfortunately never came into force because of insufficient number of ratifications. And in moving forward, and this is perhaps a more policy-oriented action, thinking about not only institutions such as 5+5 of the Union for the Mediterranean, which we see as somewhat more limited in terms of cooperation as regards climate, although there are initiatives in terms of managing water stress in Africa. but perhaps establishing networks similar to the ones that have been established, for example, between Spain, Portugal, and other countries in Latin America called the RIOC. It's the Ibero-American Network of Climate Change Offices. This is a technical network that gathers around the COP every year, that has helped establish not only mutual understanding and examples of good practices across the Atlantic, but also helps to sort of come to certain agreements in terms of negotiating positions. So here my proposal would be to develop or to replicate our network that has been running for 15 years, a couple of years back. So it's been a long time running, to a network of African and European climate change offices to foster dialogue without that paternalism that has been criticized in the literature as being not very constructive, to exchange experiences, for example, in terms of loss and damage, which some of the African countries have included in their nationally determined contributions, and developed countries in Europe, for example, are just not including in their current national climate change laws, for example. These networks also serve to increase trust and to address joint challenges. So that would be all from my side, and thank you very much for listening. I'm open to questions.
So thank you very much, Lara, great job. So I'm going to the questions. Yes. The first question is, I have observed that most of the statistical data referenced during the training are not current, but dates as far back as 2016. What are the challenges to having current and updated data on renewable energy in Africa? So this is the time for questions. Okay, this is the first one. Lara,
that would be for me or for other speakers in the panel?
So is the question for you?
For me, okay, great. So thank you very much. It is true that there's a certain lag in the analysis and in the data. I mean, if you have more updated data, that would be fantastic to study and to analyze. I would highly recommend the reading of Munoz and Socona, because that's an interesting comparison, and it goes because my focus is on nationally determined contributions. This focuses on the first round of NDCs, so the NDCs that have to be renewed ahead of COP26. We haven't had a new round of global NDCs. These analyses will be updated as soon as we have the next round of NDCs. Hopefully, these will also include, this new round of NDCs will also include the plans and strategies that African, but also other countries did not include in the NDCs last time, because I think something that's very important to remember is that these NDCs are the international commitments, and they are a signaling instrument for international investors that, if you have been following different initiatives at the international level by institutional investors, they are moving towards green climate finance, or climate finance in particular. So as soon as this new round of NDCs is available, I am sure the next will update what's happening right now. The first round of NDCs go up. So these commitments, even though they were presented in 2015, they go either up to 2025 or to 2030. So the next round of NDCs will update that data and hopefully also increase the ambition. I think it's important to note that COVID-19 is putting everyone at a crossroads. So we will have to look very carefully for that increase in ambition, because as you probably know, and I don't know whether I mentioned it, but in South Africa, yeah, I believe I did mention it in the presentation. In South Africa, the government's recovery plan has reignited fossil fuels, has gone through the route of fossil fuels by and large. This is not rare. I mean, if you analyze the data for the recovery packages in the aftermath of the 2008 global financial crisis, only 16% of all of the finance went to green finance. So we are again at a crossroads, and we will have to see how the new NDCs fare in order to give you an update. But they are, that data is appropriate for the first round of NDCs. I don't know whether perhaps other presenters could fill you in the renewable energy commitments post NDCs.
Okay, more questions. Thanks for your presentation. My question is, Africa is not, don't know, is not at the developed continent, I would say, is not complete the sentence. And in the past 50, 100 years, the temperature has increased 0.5 degrees centigrade. What was the cause of this?
Right, I'm not sure I completely understand the question. I think what you mean is why has it warmed if it wasn't developed? Okay, so this is, I think this goes back to a stock and a flow problem. The problem of climate change is a stock problem. So imagine a bathtub, okay? If you want to limit the level of greenhouse gas emissions that then cause increases in temperature, you have to balance out what's coming in from the tap from what's going out of the drain, okay? And it doesn't matter for the climate whether you are emitting in Africa or in China. The emissions of the globe affect differently, asymmetrically, all of the world. So there has been different degrees of warming in different countries, despite the fact that some countries have contributed more and some countries have contributed less. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, seeing the level of success that most developed countries has recorded in this area of climate change, what effort is African leadership, especially ECOWAS state, is making to limit climate change?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your question, Enga. Well, as we have seen, there's not enough coverage of all of the NDCs in the information I presented, and there's the databases are limited in terms of comparison. There are, as I said, some countries that have been very forward-looking, such as Morocco, Ethiopia, Kenya, and others less so. There was a change in policy in 2011 in South Africa. There were interesting developments a couple of years back. But for example, the photovoltaic sector in South Africa has been known to have come to basically a standstill. So that there's an asymmetric response. There are also understandably different interests and different socioeconomic conditionings that affect this leadership by different actors. Next question.
Yes, the next question is, what can you tell us about the carbon market as support for the sustainable energy project for sub-Saharan countries with their NDC commitments?
Well, as we saw from the analyses, most of the African countries, not all of them, but most of them support the use of market-based instruments. It is true that with the CDM in the context of the Kyoto Protocol, there might have been a better use or a more beneficial use of market-based instruments for Africa. The CDM largely benefited, if I remember correctly, mostly China. So I think it's in Africa's interest and in different, especially in those countries that support market-based mechanisms, to be sitting at the table and negotiating Article 6 ahead of COP26. I'm just going back to my presentation. I can see Burkina Faso willing to engage in some. I'm going to read the countries that are willing to engage. So Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Congo, Republic of Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, Egypt, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Lesotho, Liberia, sorry, Morocco, Mozambique, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, Tunisia, Uganda, and Zambia. All of those countries, so most of them that have been analyzed, support market-based instruments, and I think it's very important to be able to sit at the table and perhaps, you know, sort of untangle that knot with bearing in mind that Brazil has a difficult position as regards market-based instruments.
Okay, so we still have 2 more minutes for questions. Do you want Lara to extend any explanation, or because
no, I was
don't
just
have more questions?
I wanted to thank you again all for being here and for listening. I know it's almost lunchtime here in Europe, and it might be just after lunchtime over there. So thank you ever so much for coming. Thank you, Jose Maria, for organizing. And I really look forward to keeping in touch.
Okay, so you are welcome. Thank you very much. And yes, just to tell you that it's important for reading the presentations. You can go to the ECREEE web page or to the AMENET page, right? So you can, this afternoon, you can go there and check them. And for the questions not answered, you can go, you have the questions, the answer in a written way by the trainers, particularly for the first presentation. So thank you very much for your attendance, and tomorrow we start again at the same time, just at noon, and it will be the last, as you know, the last session also of this training. So thank you very much again for your attendance. Have a good day.
Okay,
bye-bye.
Thank you, and see you tomorrow at the same time. We will start at 10 hour GMT. So thank you again for your attention, and yeah, tomorrow morning.